Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected. I'm here with Warren from Art Label, which is one of the newest OCN partner labels. Warren, thanks for hanging out tonight.
My pleasure.
I was, just recounting with Warren that Art Label is still so young. I don't happen to have any of the releases in my hands yet, but that is just more exciting for me. I feel like we have a lot more to dive into and learn because we don't have the established, feeling of a year's worth of releases to be able to look back and say this is what Art Label is. So we get to hear straight from you what to expect over the next, in the future. Who knows how long it's going to be around, but this is an exciting time. So I would love to hear everything. But the first thing, I mean, we gotta learn who Warren is. So who is Warren, and how'd you get to owning an OCN partner label?
It was a bunch of years ago I decided I wanted to get into film distribution. And it's funny because one of the things that convinced me of that was I had gone to this screening in downtown LA of a bunch of rare, Mike Kuchar films, and he was present, so that was really great. And the guy who was putting on the screenings, had told me that he had previously run Other Cinema, that DVD company that was, I guess, kind of short-lived, but they put out some really great stuff, and how it wasn't worth it because he made no money off of it. And I was like, but I love what you did.
Right.
So, I mean, there's value in that. And so I wanted to, contribute to making strange stuff available. And, that began with Verboten Video, which was a venture I tried to do on my own. And we put out Split, Holy Moly, and, co-released Blonde Death the first time around on DVD with Bleeding Skull. But then that was it was too much to do on my own, I decided. And so I partnered up with a good friend, and we did Culture Shock releasing for a while, which was a OCN partner label as well. And now, he's doing his own thing with that, and they're teamed up with Terror Vision. But yeah, I mean, that was all, it was like horror and exploitation and sex comedies, and I liked that stuff, but I really wanted to get weird, I really wanted to dig up some strange things to put out, and it didn't really fit what Culture Shock was about. Right. And hence Art Label. And I was lucky enough to have the support of Justin and those guys at OCN Vinegar Syndrome to let me find some really weird stuff and try to give it an audience.
The audience is already knocking. We've got 3 releases that are out so far. We've got the Surf Reality Movie of the Month Club. That's a full collection. We've got Cracking Up, and then Stasis Satyricon was just announced in February. We're going to be talking about the newest one for March here soon. But the overall feeling, though, is a lot of people just don't know what you're after. So with all of these films so far, it just seems a little crazy experimental. Like, some of the choices in some of these look wild. Is experimental pretty much going to be the heart of Art Label?
Yeah, the real drive of it is to be a venue for a selection of films that doesn't necessarily have a through line. And if you pick it up, you never are quite sure what you're going to get, but you know it's going to be a unique experience.
And are you doing this alone now as well under Art Label?
This one is a solo venture presently, although, I may end up pairing up with someone along the way.
So was that nerve-wracking going back to doing it alone after you did it for a little while?
A little bit, but the first time around with Verboten, I really knew nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a deal with, I'll just say, one of the major distributors, and had a very bad experience with that. Made $0, and they sold quite a lot. So I had to learn that lesson and then find a better partner in OCN to continue doing things. But then once I got the hang of that, I thought, okay, I can do this on my own now that I know the ropes and what not to do.
Well, and I will say we won't spend a whole lot of time on it since it is in the rear view, but Culture Shock was really interesting, especially in the beginning days of Culture Shock, because before they were an OCN partner label, I was on board. I swear, from the first release, you put out, I think, 4 or 5 DVDs before jumping in with Vinegar Syndrome, and they were all solid. Had good bundles coming out with some fun merch ideas. But the big thing is they were films that were not like anything else that we were getting from most other labels. So you could tell it was somebody who's trying to do something interesting. And that scrappy feeling, I'm feeling this again with what you're putting out so far with these
cool.
titles that we see.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely take that as a compliment. Although I'm a fan of like most of the stuff that we put out under Culture Shock.
Right.
And the beginning was very exciting, not only because it was something new and bigger for me, but
right.
There was some risks we were taking there that were fun.
Well, with Art Label, I mean, it's a risk going with OCN. I mean, you don't know exactly what you're getting into. Obviously, you had seen some of it with Culture Shock, but why, for anybody that's considering, starting their own label, why partner up with somebody like OCN?
Well, there's a broad existing fan base there that I think, through purchasing discs from OCN over the years, they've got open minds and are willing to take risks and just blind buy something that looks good. And I think, oftentimes that's rewarded. So hopefully that'll be the case with any Art Label discs that someone picks up.
I would love to hear, has there been a lot of feedback on the 3 discs that have been out yet?
Yeah, so every once in a while, I'll check on the Vinegar Syndrome site at reviews that have gone up for those. Last time I looked, there weren't any for Cracking Up yet, but it's almost all 5-star reviews for Surf Reality, which is really great to see, because I wasn't quite sure how people were going to react to that, because they are out there and they're pretty unpolished. For anyone not familiar, the whole premise of the Surf Reality Movie of the Month Club was, Matt Mittler, who was strangely pedigreed, was classically trained as a mime, but was also in The Mutilator. He got together a bunch of his friends from the Lower East Side performing arts community, and someone had challenged them to shoot a feature film in a single day. And so they did that, and that was Kid Scarface. That's the first one in the set. And then they're like, you know what, we can do better, we can do more. And so they were doing these once a month and self-releasing them on VHS. I think there were ads for it in Playboy, or they got a write-up in Playboy. And then they were endorsed by Church of the Subgenius. Reverend Ivan Stang had really positive things to say about the movies, particularly Dick and Jane Drop Acid and Die, which, how do you see a title like that and not want to watch it?
Exactly. It's an immediate thing that's going to catch your attention, of course.
Yeah, when I first learned about this set of films, it was through a guy. Of course, I'm going to blank on his name right now, and I feel very bad about it. But he shared the list of titles with me, and I saw Alien, Sex Phone, Psycho, and I was like, I don't even have to watch these. Just let's make a deal.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and I gradually got them from the few people who had copies left. Most of the masters had been destroyed or lost. So what was culled together for this release, and then a wonderful set of interviews with a lot of the surviving cast and crew, made for a really great inaugural release, I think.
Well, with any new label, that first release has to be a trepidatious decision. It has to be one that you really consider. It's going to be setting the tone for what you're putting out for at least the first 6 to 8 months, and after that, there might be some evolutions. But to capture some of those first fans, what was your mission behind this release? What do you want people to really grab onto?
So at first, I thought of it as like a lost. Glancing at my collection to remember the name. What the hell's that guy's name? Sorry, just a second.
No, you're fine.
It's killing me, man. Who did Guru the Mad Monk and Seeds and
Oh, good lord. Hold on. 1 second, I'll get it.
I read his biography. Like it's there.
Andy Milligan.
Thank you. Ridiculous the things that fall out of my brain.
Oh yeah. If I didn't do 3 recordings today, I probably would have had that.
But anyway, yeah, I thought like it was kind of a lost set of Andy Milligan films. And then as I watched them more and more, I realized there was a little more like intellectually going on there. Not to knock Andy Milligan, because I love some of his
that makes sense.
But that was what I wanted, was to have this whole collection of films that no one had ever seen or heard of, and just be like, hey, look at this.
Wow. It's an interesting approach to a first release. And when people are looking at that, it has to feel like a bold choice. And, with it, there's a really bold set of artwork on the front of the release. There's a lot of names that are eye-catching on the back. And so it makes sense. I completely get it. And with that, you got to follow it up, and follow it up. You did. I mean, the other stuff that you're putting out, we've got the second release is Cracking Up, and then Stice is Satyricon, but Cracking Up is the other one that's going to be in people's hands by the time that we're recording this. So, gosh, I would love to hear about this one, because again, looks like very similar feeling release.
Yeah, and it is in a lot of ways. The people who were involved in Cracking Up, I mean, it was directed by Matt Mittler, and he's the star. They kind of look at that as the thesis film. So they took everything that they learned doing the Surf Reality Movie of the Month Club features and, shot a feature on 16 with an actual script and rehearsals. Not a lot of takes. If you listen to the commentary, you'll hear some funny tidbits about that. But yeah, it was stylistically and technically, it's leaps and bounds above the Surf Reality features, and it's a much more cohesive thing. But it's a really strange experience, that film. One of the things that it does most invaluably is capturing a lot of the performance art scene as it was happening in the Lower East Side in the 90s. There are a lot of regular performers from that time period in the movie, and it includes cast members as, who would go on to do a lot of like bigger things. Like Toby Huss is in it in a very small role, who, a lot of our generation, I think, knows as Artie, the strongest man in the world from Pete and Pete.
Yeah. And
then it has a woman who was big on Mad TV, whose name again is escaping me because I'm terrible at that, but it's a really wild ride, and it's kind of like a Lenny Bruce story with a much darker conclusion.
Well, and the New York, it's kind of hard to even say the New York scene, because the 90s in New York was home to very unique sets of scenes depending on where you were, obviously. And it seems like in a more broad, like philosophical way, that was kind of the last generation that was super DIY grassroots without being hipsterish, and really, with the resources that we have today. So it did feel a little more scrappy. It felt a little more lived in, and that's where you get things, like the Larry Clark films that came out around that time, that were, a very different, obviously, than what we're getting, on your label here. But it was this really interesting time, and so I'm always interested in releases that will transport me into something that I wasn't in New York in the 90s, so I don't know what that's like. So this is culture diving for me. I get to watch something like this and fall in and go, holy shit, this is a brand new world. And I, can love or hate it, but either way, it's like an education. Love stuff like that.
Yeah, that's kind of a eloquent way of also stating my goal with the label, is to give that to people.
Interesting. And not everything's New York. I believe you've got more coming, right, that are based elsewhere.
I do. And it's funny because Stice is a experimental music group from Brooklyn, and it was like, man, 3 New York releases in a row. It was not planned that way. I was thinking maybe I'd picked the wrong name for the label, but coming out, well, it'll be available for pre-order on March 1st, is The Absence of Milk in the Mouths of the Lost, which is a shot primarily in Los Angeles film, although you might not realize it to watch it because there were very strange locations picked for it. And that's the second feature film by a young director named Case Esperas, who's a New Orleans native, but has lived in the LA area most of his life. Very excited about this release. I was able to DP most of the movie. There were a couple days I had to miss, unfortunately, but I think it looks really cool. I'm partial. But it one of the co-stars is Gary Wilson, the outsider artist musician, and it has an original score by Aaron Dillaway from Wolf Eyes.
Wow.
And then the other star is Hannah Weir, who was in Hustlers and a few other indie films. It's a really strange, surrealist portrait of this ethereal character who is there perhaps to help, lost children. And it's a very visual film, and then the original score by Aaron Dillaway is really haunting and weird. Adds a really nice texture to the whole experience.
Interesting. Sounds like a very personal experience. I mean, not only with you attached to it, but also just the story that's telling. That's incredible.
Yeah, and there's a lot of detail in the commentary and the behind the scenes featurette, but it is a very personal story for the director, Case.
And so far it appears, and not to throw shade at some of the other labels, but there are some of the partner labels that they'll put a double feature but go really light on the special features. It looks like you're diving into as much of that as you possibly can to give context to all these releases, which is much appreciated.
Yeah, I definitely get as much additional content as possible.
Well, and we probably should talk about it. There's a giant wall behind you that you clearly are one of us. What do you collect? Are you all for the advancing Blu-ray 4K? Are you still in on VHS? What do you got on the shelves?
So I moved into this space not too long ago, and so my office here is wall to wall with my DVDs and Blu-rays. I've got about 5,500. Of those. It's kind of a point of pride and shame.
Yeah.
All my VHS are sadly in boxes in a storage unit. I really hope to dig those out sometime and appreciate them again. But I've got laser discs down there too of some CEDs. Really, everything.
Nice. I have, I think, less than like 15, but I've got a handful of laser discs in the room still, and some VHS. But I mean, nowadays with what we're getting from these boutique labels, it's hard not to just love the products that we're getting. I mean, the way you brought up Blonde Death, the fact that we're getting a new remaster of Blonde Death on Blu-ray, that's kind of crazy to think that we're doing that in 2024.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, disc sales are not great. It's not
Right.
like in the VHS boom of the 80s and 90s where, like, you could move just an astounding number of copies. Like, it's definitely a niche market, but the amount of stuff that's available now and the breadth of things that are available now is really astounding, and it's kind of a wonderful time to be a collector.
Is there a certain thing that you feel yourself drawn to purchasing more than others?
Unfortunately, I made the mistake of getting a region-free player, and so I've been collecting a lot of like Indicator and a lot of Via Vision, a lot of foreign releases rather.
I mean, to me, a lot of the most exciting stuff is the stuff that we're getting from some of these other countries, especially, Via Vision and Imprint. I mean, every single month when they announce titles, they might announce 8 movies and 5 of them are first time ever on Blu-ray. And it's like, how do you keep doing this? This seems impossible.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I set myself to the task of upgrading all my DVDs to Blu-ray, which I have not completed that task yet, but it's
Right.
like, I can't get 4 rooms on Blu-ray, from an American release, so I gotta look outward.
What's funny is right over the shoulders, 4 rooms from Via Vision right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, with Art Label though, there's so many of these things that we are rescuing from a format that people would not generally think needs to be on high definition. And one of the things I always try to talk about with some of these labels that are focusing on some of these more niche formats is, what do you feel is the reason? Obviously, Blu-ray is the preferred format nowadays, but what benefits are you getting out of putting these things on Blu-ray?
Well, H.264 is much better compression than MPEG-2. That's my main thing, because the blockiness that you see in old DVDs that were poorly compressed, like, it just kills me.
Yeah.
I absolutely hate it. So just better compression, and fits better on a shelf with your other discs, and the more space there is on the Blu-ray, especially if you're looking at a BD50, it's just all the more bonus content that you can throw on there as well without sacrificing quality on the feature.
Now, the restoration process behind some of these, what lengths are you going to? I mean, some of these are tape elements so far, right? Most of them?
Yeah, it varies. So depending on what's available, for Culture Shock, we had a handful of sources for Death Magic, and none of them were great. And it was shot on VHS, well, SVHS, I think. And, I got 4 or 5 different masters from the director and captured them all. There was a video transfer house here in town that I really liked to use that sadly has gone out of business, but they did really great work. And so I would get all my sources, line them up, A/B them just to see, like, do we have more detail in the shadow here? If I've got more shadow detail in this source, do we lose highlight detail? And for that one, the director had really wanted to shoot it on film. And so we went through and shot by shot, made the best adjustments we could to really get all the quality and color information out of that source that we could. So it can be like that, shot by shot, or if we have a really good source, like if someone has a solid 1-inch master, then it's just like a little sweetening to master it for Blu-ray.
And we kind of glossed over it, so I want to give enough love to Stice. We get this release, and I don't know if it was you that was writing the copy, but I believe they used the words bold and brassy. And when you look at the thumbnails for this movie that they're showing as the eye-catching stills for you to want to choose it, bold and brassy is a really good choice. And man,
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And,
nice.
The eyeball in the mouth and the sawing of the hand off, yeah.
So with Stice's Satyricon, what can people expect out of this one? Because it is, it looks like a fever dream.
And it really does feel like that. I mean, the the band did this record, and the band being it's Caroline Bennett and Jake Lichter. Jake does all the music, and Caroline does all the lyrics and the vocals. So she is a very prolific artist and does all kinds of stuff outside of Stice. Jake also does all kinds of stuff outside of Stice. And so they had decided, I think almost as a joke, like, hey, let's make a feature film out of this album, Satyricon, and only show it once. And, you could buy like a special edition of the album on their Bandcamp, I think it was, where I bought it. And I watched it because I really liked all their other music, and I really like Caroline's art, and I just couldn't believe what I was watching, because a far cry from Fellini's Satyricon, I promise you. Like, Caroline plays every part. There's all kinds of weird computer animation and really just ridiculous compositions and montage. It's a really wild thing, and it's a feat, kind of. I don't want to diminish Jake's input, but it's really like a one-woman show.
Right.
But it's so colorful. There's so many different backdrops and locations, and the songs are in there too. So it breezes by, and it's a very fever dream is exactly the way to describe it.
Well, and I don't know if it's just the style of the first three releases that we've been able to read through, but something about the overall feeling of the label screams to me that the person behind it has always been steeped pretty deeply in music. Is that the case?
It is. Yeah, I mean, I think I would go insane if I didn't have music. The times when I had to move and all my records were in boxes, it's like my skin was crawling off my body until I could listen to music at will.
What kind of genres, and who are some big inspirations for you?
Oh God. I mean, as a teenager, I came up during the nu metal thing, so
didn't we all?
I was definitely a Korn kid at school. But since then, I had a really lengthy punk and hardcore phase. But then I also have always enjoyed hip hop, but particularly really nasty horrorcore. I was a juggalo when I was a kid, and might still be. But but yeah, I also really love free jazz and fusion jazz and IDM and all of that. So it's broad. I don't go for much country, but it's pretty broad.
There is something about, especially a label that is describing themselves as art house experimentation. Something about that, it just gives off, everybody that loves art house experimentation film, we all kind of dabble in a lot of music and really love all those things that push the boundaries. And I would love to know if there was some random psychological study of everybody that loves this sort of thing. Why? is there a reason? Because I completely agree, and I'm on board with all of it.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest turnkey moment for me was when I discovered Square Pusher and Aphex Twin, because that kind of redefined what music could be to me. And I still listen to a lot of that stuff today, and I guess that kind of informs the decision I made with Art Label. I want to push the concept of movie. It can be so much.
Interesting. And we're seeing that with a lot of the releases from you, and honestly a lot of the other partner labels. The fact that we have so many that are focusing on short films is so gratifying, because that's not something that gets a lot of love on physical media, and lately we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some short film collections that I want to work on at some point in the near future. They're not set in stone yet, but I do think it's a neglected medium, certainly.
For anybody, I guess, that's super excited about these first three, I probably should ask, what's the future plans? Are you planning on doing a release every month? It sounds like you're busy with doing some of this other stuff.
So it's been really heavy up front. It's going to be a little less frequent as we move forward, because there were a handful of things that I really needed to get out. Then I wanted them out as soon as I could get them out.
Right.
And there are still some things in the pipeline that are, I guess you would say, archival, not current productions. So there will be some more older things that are hopefully new to a lot of people. But I also really want to focus on new productions. An aspect of Art Label that I didn't have in Culture Shock was the ability to take the time to find some interesting voices and lend some production experience and aid to those people to try to not only dig up unique weird things but contribute to creation of them.
Interesting.
And so there's a contact form on the artlabel.org website, and if anyone is you have some like burning need to tell a story and it's really out there, but just need a little help, reach out to me. And, if it's an idea that I like, I'd love to help some people get their weird movies made.
Yeah, this is something I was going to push into a lot. You did, probably 5 or 6 weeks ago now, you did an interview with They Live by Film, which is a podcast on my podcast network. And it was great. And you guys had a real long conversation about the production house aspect. And with that, I would love to hear for people that are trying to dive into current cinema and find these, not like marginalized voices necessarily, but voices that are struggling to find a wider audience. Where do you go to find that, other than people submitting onto the website, because that's the easiest way? But how do you find them?
That's funny. I mean, I met Case because he just worked at the video store that I go to rent movies.
I love that.
Yeah, and he seemed like a really strange, interesting guy. And he said that he his first feature film was available there to rent. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll get that too. And I thought, man, if this guy had a little more resources behind him, he could probably make something. Not that I'm not throwing shade at his first film, but there were fewer resources available to him for that, I think. So I asked him if he was working on anything else, and he said that there was a story he'd been trying to tell like his whole life, and it was really personal to him. So he told me a little bit about it, and I was like, for sure, like I'm on board. I'll shoot it. I'll produce it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, let's just make this thing.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes I just cruise around Instagram looking for art that I like and reach out to people. And other times it's just friend of a friend or just people I randomly encounter.
Are you much of like a festival attender? I know there are quite a few labels that are doing that a lot.
I used to be, but I kind of like coming in from the ground up. Like, I think once you're at the festival, there's a really competitive attitude and atmosphere that I don't find conducive to art making. I mean, it's great for the people who have success stories coming out of that, but for me, it's just not an atmosphere that I really enjoy.
Well, and with the festival landscape, I guess is the best way to say it, kind of exploding with, obviously there's this whole underbelly of sham festivals, not necessarily what I'm talking about, but there's so many legit festivals that are doing great nowadays. It's more of a competition now, not only just with the films, but also the festivals against each other, which makes it competitive within a competition, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Painful. I mean, how do you think that we're going to get the right voices to shine if you are making it a fucking bloodfest at every step?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge, certainly.
And now, I mean, we could argue that with all the boutique labels, because I think at my last count, there was somewhere like 115 active boutique labels in the world, at least. That's a lot for home video in a field that's struggling.
Then the funny thing is, most of us know each other,
right?
Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm friends with most of them, just because we haven't had that much exposure to each other. But there aren't there are fewer conflicts than you would imagine. It's actually a pretty friendly community. Like, I used to do a lot of work for Severin, like doing their color correction, dirt removal on their scans, and have done for Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome and Cult Epics and Grindhouse. Like, it's just when you're in it, you just end up working with a lot of these people.
Well, and again, if it's a niche that's already struggling, everybody kind of has to help everybody, or it all just folds within each other. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely not an industry where you want to burn bridges.
Well, and on that note, it's been an interesting year. I mean, we've gotten announcements for titles that we thought were long impossible to get, and then on top of those positive news, there's Best Buy shutting down and Disney leaving Australia. And now this whole Sony and Disney deal that we're not still necessarily sure what's going to come from that. But if somebody that's an owner of a very small label, how do you feel? Is there a lot of optimism for the next couple of years, you think?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has come out, but there's still a lot of stuff languishing that
Right.
hasn't been discovered, or the rights haven't been worked out, and then there's a lot of new stuff to be made, and that's where I'm putting a lot of my efforts is in the new things that are exploring, territory we haven't seen so many times. Like, I love slashers; I'll watch them all the time, but there are other modes of expression that can be just as tantalizing and exciting.
Yeah, that's an example of one of those ones. There's enough labels putting out slashers. We need more of the experimental.
On the Disney note, I'm really hoping that what that means is that we'll actually get more Blu-rays for properties that Disney owns, because they weren't big
Yep.
on putting out Blu-rays, and so hopefully we'll get more stuff that we don't have.
Yeah, I'm one of the ones I'm feeling kind of optimistic about it, I want to be cautious about that because I feel like I'm just setting myself up for failure. But it's one of those things that I mean, any ounce of hope that we can hold on to, it's good. And for those of us that love the boutiques, like, it doesn't feel on the inside like it's bad, but then you take a step back and realize, well, how many other normal not physical media collectors in your community are buying even one release in the last 6 months? And the answer is not very many.
Yeah, it's funny. This happened a lot with Culture Shock too, but when I record interviews with people who were involved in these movies, and particularly anything from the 80s and even into the 90s, we'll get the interviews and they'll be really excited that their movie's going to come out again. And when I have a stack of them in hand, I reach out to the people who I was able to interview, etc., and say, hey, I'd love to send you a copy. And a lot of times they'll get it and be like, it doesn't play.
Yep.
And then I'll find out they don't own a Blu-ray player.
I totally saw that coming. Yeah, I've dealt with that too. I think it was Monday of this week, I interviewed somebody from a film from '85, and we were talking for a while, and I said, yeah, we'll try to get you a comp copy as soon as we can, and see what we can do. She's like, I don't have a Blu-ray player. What am I going to do?
And the funny thing is, like, you can get one for like $50.
Right.
It's not a big investment.
Right. Yeah, I love that there are still so many minds that want to be passionate about it, but at the same time, I feel like we need a failure point with streaming, and I think this year we're starting to see some of that weaken. I mean, the strikes happening seem to be at the perfect time to get people kind of good and pissed off that content wasn't exactly where they wanted it. Every so often, it seems like about once or twice a week now, there's some random title that the internet goes ablaze on because they can't find it anywhere. And so I mean, the more that happens, I feel like we're edging closer to a little bit of a surge, hopefully.
I mean, maybe it'll be like vinyl. It was kind of dead for a couple decades, and then it got rediscovered, and it has a whole new life. So hopefully that's what will happen with physical media for the visual format.
Well, and you're doing that for a lot of these films that were older that really only had a community to show them for the most part, for especially the first couple of releases. And now with the newer films, I mean, I'd love to hear some metrics on physical media collectors, because it appears to me that, with most releases being of older films, how are those new films selling? Is that something that you've got an eye on at all?
It depends. I mean, for those who were watching when it happened, Debbie Does Demons sold out like
very quickly.
But of course, that's Donald Farmer, and everyone loves Donald Farmer, so that's kind of a known quantity.
Right.
For other things that are lesser known, it's really hard to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most labels would predict that we'd be at exactly this position in 2024. It was either much more doomsday approaching or much more optimistic. And unfortunately, we seem to be somewhere in this weird nether regions in the middle.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't know if we're actually living in reality or if it's a dream.
Well, either way, it'll be a nice experimental film, and Art Label will probably put it out.
Just may.
Yeah. Warren, this has been a whole heck of a lot of fun. I hope that we can check in maybe in a handful of more releases and see where the label's headed after those. And I mean, good luck with the features. Producing is a lot of work, and I think a lot of people take that for granted. So
yeah, especially when people sling mud at a movie. Like, I don't like not enjoying a movie either, but
right.
I also understand like the amount of work it takes to even make a piece of shit. So yeah.
Even some of the, the artistic choice to make a full feature in one day that you've seen visited on some of your releases, like that's nearly impossible for most people to even come up with something to do that.
Yeah, it's really a feat, and a feat that I want to immortalize and celebrate.
Well, you are doing it, and I hope people check it out. And the big thing, I know a lot of people watching this have probably got at least one release, but I really want to say the hardest part with new labels on OCN that I've talked to in the past, it seems like if they don't get a lot of orders in that first month, those past orders, they don't do well. So take a minute to go back to the last few months, look at what Art Labels put out, pick up some older titles. Don't let them languish on the site. People, need support to keep these going. If one sounds interesting, pick up one, and you might fall in love with it. And when you're somebody curating the way Warren seems to be, this seems like a fun label to follow.
Thank you. Yeah, I really do think that the first two in particular are going to be word of mouth. It's kind of a slow grow on sales on those.
Well, as a psych major, Cracking Up is one that I went into immediately. So I've got that one coming to me now, and I cannot wait to dive in.
All right, fantastic. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, thanks, Warren. We'll talk again soon.
All right, great. Take care.
Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.